You cannot invent and pioneer if you cannot accept failure.
We wanted people that were insanely great at what they did.
Nobody was making any money at all. Most people thought the internet was going to be a fad.
Nataraj, it's happening. We're doing it. We're doing a collab podcast together. What's up, man? Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jim. Always good to meet with you and chat.
Yeah. So Nataraj and I are both in the beautiful, sometimes sunny state of Washington and Seattle. And we are both involved in Techstars, which is a startup accelerator. And they were kind enough to foot the bill for a fancy event at a Mariners game. They rented out a nice little section, had some free drinks and food, and I cozied up with Nataraj and got to learn all of his secrets. I was like, we should have hit record on this on the podcast. But first, what did you think of the Techstars event? What was your feedback?
It was great. They should do more of it. I was telling Marius the other day that they should host all the meetings there.
Yeah, I feel like they're really whining and dining us to ask a lot of us in this batch with like 24 startups. So they've gotten applications for thousands of startups. They invest in 22 to 24, and then they bring in mentors like us to help kind of supercharge them. But no, man. But before we kind of dive into it, I think today's going to be a fun one because we're going to be going all over the place with stuff that we're seeing with the landscape, with startups and companies, big companies, and what that means for listeners on how they could apply those insights to what they're doing. But would you give a little background on who the heck you are, what you've been up to? And I'd love for you to talk about your own podcast that you have as well.
Sure. So I'm Nataraj. I grew up in India, went to college there, did my master's in math, undergrad in computer science. Then I was hired by this company called Epic Systems, which is a largest electronic health record company in the US. So if you have ever gone to a hospital or a clinic in the US, there's I think 60% chance that your healthcare record is being managed by Epic. And these are old numbers when I was working there. It could be much higher now. So they are the software that hospitals and clinics, especially the large ones, use to manage their organization at the end of the day. So if you're paying copay or you're being registered, everyone in the hospital staff, or when your doctor is basically typing off when you're talking to them, that's the software they're interacting with. So I worked there for a while. They recruited me out of India. So that's how I ended up in the US. I came to the US around 2013, worked there, did a bunch of software development, full stack software development for them. So got to meet and understand in US healthcare system because of that. They had this interesting policy of visiting hospitals. So as a developer, so we are sort of like a product manager plus engineers. So we had to come up with the spec and think about what feature we are going to build next. And we used to do that by actually visiting hospitals. So I was at the front desk, behind this front desk, and I visited like all the famous hospitals in the US, from Kaiser Permanente, you name it, all the big health organizations, Stanford Health, Kaiser, Mayo, Cleveland Clinic. So we used to fly out either sometimes customers' expense or Epic's expense because we are doing product research, and sort of see how the software is being used while the employees in the healthcare network are using it. So sometimes we used to stand at the front desk, sometimes we used to stand at inside when a doctor is performing some of his consultation, depending on what product you're working, right? So that was a very interesting and fun experience in Madison, Wisconsin. Then I moved out to Seattle to start work with Microsoft, where I still am. So right now, I spent in a bunch of different products inside Microsoft, did software development as an engineer, Now I'm currently as a product manager for Azure Files, um, where we are developing large scale file systems for on Azure Cloud. Um, I also have this podcast called Startup Project. It's my excuse to sort of talk to interesting people. Like I've talked to a lot of Seattle-based investors, folks from Madrona, Techstar Seattle, Ascend VC, and also some of the interesting investors and founders from India. Um, and because of that, I also get to interact with a lot of startups and invest in them. Yeah, so that's a brief background of what I do.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because you and I have very unique paths. Well, obviously, Oklahoma and India are very different, but I'm thinking more so the path of like, you've gone this route of like, you've worked at some big, like hard to get jobs at big software companies, obviously like Epic and Microsoft. I've gone this other path of non technical, like startups, kind of early stage working as the marketing person. And so it's kind of interesting because I think a lot of people listen are like, what's the right path for me? Do I go maybe the harder but safer route of a bigger company? Or, maybe a more riskier route of a smaller company where you could have like bigger upside. And again, I have an agency, so I'm not building something that's looking to IPO, but like, any thoughts on that? Because what's interesting is you've gone that path, but then of a big company, but you find yourself in the startup ecosystem doing investing, and as an angel. But any thoughts on that path on like where you're at now, your phase of life versus down the road, what you'd want to do?
Yeah, I did think about this question of whether you should work for a smaller or a larger company. I think it depends on where you're at in your life. And I was discussing this with my wife as well at some point. And so she works for a late stage startup and I work for a big tech company. So it's sort of like we balance out the strategy among ourselves.
It's a good portfolio within your marriage. Nice.
Yeah, if you're thinking about it as a portfolio for your family, then I would say you could do both. But if you're just single and thinking about this, I think when you're young, it makes absolutely no sense to work at a very large company. I did that because I still am on a visa and waiting on a green card. But if you're young, and I always used to like talk to my friends who are based here and tell them like, why are you still not taking a risk? Because right now, so much of startup is de-risked. The process of raising a venture fund, raising venture capital for your startup is well defined. You could really strategize and de-risk that process of doing a company. Of course, there's still risk of you'll end up with nothing, but the side effects of starting a startup are actually positive overall, even if you fail. So I didn't understand why a lot of people choose to work at large companies. I can see that the school tuition or like the school loans, that might be the hidden factor that was driving that, because I see a lot of young people from great schools joining large companies here in Seattle. And the main reason that I see that happens is because of education loans. If that is not a factor, then it's absolutely a no-brainer to go and start something, or maybe like work a couple of years in a different company, you sort of find your expertise and learn, and then move to find a company. But again, it's sort of a personality question as well, right? Like, what are you fit for? Like, you might be fit for running a company like a marketing agency, right? You have to have those people management skills. Not everyone is built for that, right? I mean, we see that this in tech stars as well. Like, not everyone is built for management of teams. So you have to understand your skill set, I think, and it's a question of risk, how much risk you want to take. But yeah, as a portfolio, I think like I don't have the option of starting a startup unless I take extreme risk of whether being in the US or not, which I
Yeah.
don't want to. So that's why my wife takes a risk on behalf of our family, right? So that's how we look at it.
That's cool. Yeah, we're the opposite. My wife's at Amazon at Big Brother, and I'm doing my own thing. But it's so funny. But I like your framework of how you even think about it, like based on phases of life and what your risk tolerance could be. Whereas like now, I've got 2 kids and like fixed expenses every month. And it's like, now wouldn't be the time for me to like throw caution to the wind and go all in on everything. I'm a big proponent of like, take care of yourself first, whether that's if you're like have student loans, take the company, the corporate job, or whatever that could pay for it, maybe, and then go for the thing. But I do think it's funny. People think of the worst case scenario of starting or joining a startup. And it's like, oh, it goes under, runs out of money, you're fired, you have to quit, you have to get a new job. But like the byproduct of that is like you build an insane network, an insane skill set, and the doors it can open to other things are hard to get. Maybe if you're at a different kind of career path, but no, man, that's a cool kind of framework to think about it. So I think this will be interesting. We were like, what should we talk about? And we hit on some topics, and I kind of want to like leverage your insight because as someone that has their finger on the pulse of 1 technology and 2 startups, I thought it'd be interesting to go down this path of like, trends or things that we're seeing. And so I'd be interested where you'd want to jump off to. So people don't know, we're looking at a shared Google Doc with some things we want to hit on. But I'm interested whether it's like the late stage valuations, the X strategy that Elon's trying to lay the plan on Meta. I'd be interested to start in one of those 3. I'll let you choose your own adventure.
Let's go with the X strategy, right? Elon always can generate some clicks.
Perfect.
And as the marketing guy, right?
Yeah, we can even at the end talk about your podcast. You did a podcast hack to like take over India, so I'm going to pivot my podcast to be for India only listeners. But anyway, we'll start with X.
Yeah, I mean Elon works in India as well, so you could use this for India as well. Okay, so Elon, everyone knows like Elon bought Twitter for $44 billion, renamed it to X. I think everyone has an opinion about it. He did a bunch of what I would say call minor improvements. They launched a paid version. They started paying creators or, people who tweet a lot. Changed the name, fired 80% of the company or maybe more, and reinstalled Trump's Twitter account, etc., etc. And people always see that Elon's strategy is to sort of become or make X as the super app with payments because he has this background from payments and he understands payments because of his background of starting X.com 20 years back and selling that to PayPal and eventually running PayPal for a brief amount of time. But I think based on what I've observed, I think what he has really done one thing right. And we don't know if this will play out long term or not, but my theory is he actually is looking towards YouTube as his target and not a super app like, a WeChat has been floated around and comparisons to other super apps in Asia. And the reason I say is because of compensating the Twitter, heavy Twitter users essentially, or heavy tweeters, if that's a word, right? Because if you look at YouTube's strategy, right, that really one thing that works for YouTube is the moat around paying creators. They pay almost like 50%, which is like 20 billion or 25 billion, which is insane amounts of money. That is really protecting YouTube from any other, technology company coming and launching a YouTube competitor. Even if the engagement of TikTok is very high, but if you look at a creator's persona and what they do once they go viral on TikTok is basically leverage the same format on YouTube and Instagram and sort of transition into a long form content creator on YouTube. So essentially Reels, TikTok and YouTube Shorts, I would argue are top of the funnel to make a living on YouTube because that's the only real platform where someone can actually make money, not only to survive or thrive. Yeah, there are brand deals on TikTok and TikTok is spending heavily from their own, bank account, saying that we have X billion dollars assigned for creators, but I don't think it will reach a scale that YouTube already has, and that is really protecting them. So in context of Twitter, one is by compensating the heavy, regular content creators, you're protecting them not to move away from Twitter and move to, say, Threads, right? One of the things that's happening is there's a competition now between X and Threads. Threads is sort of could emerge as a actual viable competitor to Twitter. Like we have seen some Twitter alternatives that never really picked up, but I feel like Threads has enough dollars and real push behind it from Zuckerberg to actually become a viable Twitter alternative. And the only reason I think it's still not getting to a pivotal point is because of this feature. But to contradict everything I said, this might not work by observing the trend of payments. When they did the initial round of payment, it looked like, oh, this is a legit check. You're getting $3,000 or $4,000 per month, but that took account of all your lifetime of tweets. Now, if you break down that to a monthly number, and if you break down that to a yearly number from starting from now, that might not mean much. So that is the sort of a hole in the strategy that has to be filled. And I think he's trying to fill it with long form video, right? Because now if your videos can hold on user attention on Twitter, then you can throw ads on top of it, and then you can generate revenue, and then you can share that revenue towards your users. And you are already seeing the main feature improvement that happened on Twitter after Elon took it is uploading long form videos. Right. And now all you have to do is sort of give a pure video interface at a pivotal point. Once the uploads reach a certain level, then you're sort of getting into competition with YouTube. I mean, it's a long journey. I mean, it will take a lot of time and push and a lot of things to go right to get there. But I see that there is some logic in moving Twitter into YouTube than moving it into payments, because we have a ton of payments companies making no money. We have Square, we have, Apple is the behemoth here, right? Apple will dominate payments because of its consumer base in the US. So it's hard to crack that market, and it's not a high margin market in the first place at this point, right? I think that's what he's looking at. This is purely based on me looking at different data points, and other than that, there's not much going on here. I'm just looking at the features and thinking that this is what Elon might get to.
Yeah. And like historically, it's like Twitter's always had a revenue issue. Like even as like a growth marketing agency, we will spend a lot of money on companies' behalf, and they always ask us where to put the dollars. And it's no question, it's Meta Instagram ads, it's Google ads. And then maybe if you're spending enough and you have some shekels left over, we'll throw it at Twitter. And the reason for that is we can't show true ROI with certain audiences, maybe. And it just bums me. It bummed me out because I was a huge Twitter power user. It's like they have not figured out monetization. And so as Elon comes in and makes this move, so to your point, it's like they've launched, you can tip creators. There's a subscription feature. There's an ad rev share. So similar to YouTube, if they land the plane on this, I think this is really smart. Like we use ConvertKit as an email tool, and they just allowed it to where we can share our subscribers with others, and we get paid for it. And then we can pay others to share subscribers if they opt in. And we've like tripled our list. We've paid money out to them, but they're really embracing this kind of creator ecosystem where you can share revenue. So it's if they figure it out, it's amazing, because when you think about any social network, it's a two-sided marketplace. They need content, which by the way we create, and they need audiences to monetize it with eyeballs, which we are. So if they build that one side of the marketplace with content and inventory, I do think the eyeballs and people will come. But yeah, we'll see if they land the plane on it. But I thought that was an interesting call out, because I'm also thinking like, what are the second and third degree impact if this works? Like what this does to creators and whatnot. Because I'm already seeing people on my feed where it's like, oh, do you want the paid content to subscribe? I get a little annoyed just because I'm so used to the free stuff. But I'm like, wow, I see some people really leaning into that subscription component.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested, as we kind of pick on some of these bigger companies. We talked about like the Amazon Alexa failure, which is kind of funny because I was trying to pull some stats beforehand on like the size of Alexa and Amazon. because I have right here showing it's on pace to lose over 10 billion. And how there's like 83 million devices and people's or 82 million devices that have been sold, but it's still not working, which is kind of funny. It's like, what a ride. Like right when it launched, like, having this smart voice system in your home was everything, but it's kind of plateaued there. Like what has happened, and why isn't like Amazon Alexa the next distribution channel that people are building things on the back of it?
I think there are a couple of things going on, right? And my sort of take on this is they have a false product market fit. The reason being, we all know that Amazon is one of the largest websites, retail websites. I think there's like 100 million people visiting the homepage every week or month, right? So they have a monthly active user base that is phenomenal and cannot be compared with anything else. Now, you take a cheap product, that is value for your money, and put at the top of the list, then you will get hits. You will get, a certain amount of conversion guaranteed, especially if you make at cost. So what happened really with Alexa devices is, if you remember a couple of years back, Thanksgiving sale on Amazon was all about, pushing Alexa devices. There's almost like this campaign that went around of like, just like you buy a 6-pack beer, you could buy a 6-pack Alexa devices for $60 or $45. Remember that? So what it became really to me in my eyes was, hey, Thanksgiving, Christmas, the holiday season, everyone is looking to give out gifts. So Alexa sort of became the main gift item that you can give without thinking. And it was so cheap that everyone thought, okay, let me buy and try it out. It's a new gadget. I want to try it out. Let me buy it. And you're putting this at the top of your, the most visited retail page on the planet Earth. So
It's a nice unfair advantage to have that storefront when you launch a
exactly.
product.
So they got customers to try it out, and it was sort of maybe falsely construed as a product market fit, because I am willing to bet that at least 50 to 60% of those devices are not being used on a monthly basis. And if you look at your friend circle, and everyone will have an Alexa, but I haven't seen them using it. It's not plugged into your smart home anymore. At most, it's being used for alarm, right? Or if you have kids, they sort of speak to it once in a while, and that's sort of like a fad for a couple of weeks, and kids move on from it. It was also touted as like the audio being the next big operating system, and that never really sort of manifested in any way, right? And if you look at what is the problem that is sort of stopping them, is I think it's because the same products are being launched by Google and they're better. That's one reason. And they also have this operating system problem, right? You have Google and Apple sort of doing the same things that Alexa is trying to do, but at a slower pace, obviously. I'm still surprised, like, why has Google not launched more home products and sort of pushed further down, because they have a bigger advantage. And it's also because mobile still is the main computing device, and we want everything in the home to work with your mobile, right? So, but what is going good for Amazon is the Ring devices. I think Ring is potentially the go-to market here. I think they should really make Ring the center of everything, and not have multiple apps for Alexa and Ring. They should just fold Ring as the main go-to-market strategy for their house strategy. And it's a tough road for Amazon, because as long as mobile is your first computing device, Google has an edge, Apple has an edge. You're either an Apple home or a Google home, right? And even though Amazon has been trying so much in the home market, I think it is still Google's and Apple's distribution power that is really limiting them. I think that's the reason why they're not able to push it. And now, I don't know if you've recently seen, ChatGPT has a voice. And once LLMs have voice, you're looking at a whole new ecosystem being created and disrupted. So I would say ChatGPT will be killing Alexa. And Amazon's investment into Anthropic is probably a good move in that sense, because they would want to bring the power of LLM in the form of voice and give a sort of a new facelift to Amazon Alexa. And we would also probably now see a new version of voice enabled AI assistants. Even in, Microsoft used to have Cortana, remember? That was discontinued. And Siri would probably get a new facelift. And we're almost looking at almost a new era of voice assistants that are about to launch, which are going to be much more intelligent. And it's going to happen across all operating systems and devices. I think we will see something happen in Windows. I have no insider knowledge about it, but this is just purely based on what I'm seeing in the market. So I think someone screwed up internally. Alexa, I think you gave me the number, that $10 billion, right? That's only 2022. Now imagine how much has been spent in the last 5-6 years. It's anything at conservatively 30 billion at best, and you're not making any revenue out of this. I wished Amazon put more resources on their Alexa, on their Fire phone, instead of pursuing Alexa, right? Because at least you could shift and make an argument that Google Pixel came around the same time where Fire came. So if you had really done a phone well, there was a market for adoption, especially in Android space, because there was sort of like a high-end Android phone market that was only Samsung's game, and once sort of Pixel came into that era, it becomes Pixel's market. So you could make an argument that Amazon actually gave up on the phone fast and moved on to Alexa, which sort of like a bad investment strategy or capital allocation strategy. And it's also like weird one. Alexa is such a weird one in terms of like Amazon bets, because they're quick to scrap projects that are not working, right? And Alexa sort of stands out weirdly out because they've spent so much money without any revenue. And maybe this is because, okay, it will lead to better AI capabilities inside the company. That is probably the only logical explanation here. Sort of like why Bing was maintained in Microsoft for all these years, right? It sort of helped the company to get better at search and AI over the years. But although the fact that you need to sort of balance it out is Bing has always been making money and was breaking even, at least, even in the worst cases, and Alexa is not. So it's sort of like weird in terms of like Alexa, because a lot of products inside these Alexa devices, like they have Echo frames, which no one has heard. They've released the third version of it. I don't know who has ever used that product. I haven't seen it in the wild anytime other than the product releases that they show in those videos. So it's a very weird one that Alexa is inside Amazon. I actually like the fact that they do experiment with a lot of things, but they also know when to scrap them. But with Alexa, they have a blind spot. I think that's my overall take on why I think Alexa has a sort of this false sense of product market fit internally.
Yeah, false sense of product market fit probably hurts even worse when you're at that scale, because you have those false signals like, wow, we're selling this like crazy. But it's like, yeah, you can discount it, throw it on your homepage of the biggest store in the world, and it's gangbusters, where their true metric for success wasn't first time acquisition. It's kind of like software, it's retention. Like, are people using it? Are they innovating on it? I love your point as far as like Ring should be that flagship product because there's a natural use case there, and that's how you really own the home, right? And it's funny, I thanks to my 6-year-old at our school, she's friends with a boy who his dad's the CFO of Ring. So I was like trying to see what it's like working at that scale. But yeah, I just wanted to name drop that my kid's friends with the dad of CFO of Ring. So there we go.
But since we're talking about Amazon, what do you think of Amazon ads? Have you guys experimented with Amazon ads platform as a marketing firm?
Not as much for us, as like we're kind of staying with the tried and true like ones that we're good at, but it's one we're keeping an eye on. What's really interesting is Buy with Prime, putting that on Shopify-based websites, because people see that as a missed opportunity if they're not doing it, because if they're worried they're going to lose out to a competitor on Amazon, because it's so easy to buy there, your wallet's already open. Buy with Prime is working extremely well with some of our clients, and that's for me been super interesting to see that partnership with Shopify and the buy with Prime experience. I was listening to Toby, CEO of Shopify, talk about it, where he's like, it's a no-brainer we would do that because it makes a better experience for our merchants and for the customers, so he sees Amazon more as a rival than a competitor, if there's a distinction in that. But that one's been interesting to see the traction.
It's funny how the sort of market perception changed, or is being trying to change, on that sense of like whether Amazon is a competitor to Shopify or not, right? Because just a couple of years back, Shopify started its own physical network. They're competing. Amazon used to have sort of their own payments, and then they sort of partnered with Stripe. They've tried something, like a Shopify competitor, and then now they're doing more active partnership with Shopify. So it's interesting to see that dynamic change as well.
Yeah, right. Trying to rewrite the history or what's going on. Let's go down the meta path as far as like checking in on their strategy, but even their AI strategy going forward, because you brought up a good point. You're like, man, they were quick to rebrand without having real traction on how Meta is working or not. But I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah, so with Meta, I think we could talk about two things. One is like the whole renaming strategy, right? If every time like any big company renamed themselves based on a moonshot, then Google would have 12, 13 names, right? They could card themselves as a self-driving company. They could rename themselves as a smart AI company, right? Microsoft could have called themselves as Xbox, Office, or HoloLens company, right? I think the strategy why Meta did that was, I don't know if you remember this, but like 3 years back or maybe 4 years back, like every 2 months, Mark was in a congressional hearing, right, talking about how they're breaking privacy laws. And all he had to do, I think, was to wait 6 months and to sort of TikTok to enter into the US market, and everything sort of died down, right? And they were no longer perceived as the main player, sort of getting attacked. I think it's not really about metaverse being the next big thing that was driving that renaming, but it was the continuous political attacks and regulatory attacks that the company was getting. And that sort of like made them, hey, let's rebrand and see. And, some, marketing consultant said, hey, let's rebrand, and sort of maybe that will reduce our attacks. Because I don't think like people are, these guys are smart enough to know that this is a moonshot, right? However big the opportunity is, and they know that the timing might not be right? I mean, it's not like people in Meta are oblivious to that fact, right? Then, so that can't be the only reason why they changed the name to Meta. It's mostly, I feel, it's about regulatory regulatory pressure. We're getting all this bad publicity. Maybe we change the name and sort of, shield ourselves from a little bit. But, luckily, Meta got TikTok and then Elon Musk at the forefront of everything. So now Zuck is no longer the baddest guy in tech, right? Elon took that mantle away from him, and everything is fine. I think all they had to do was wait for 6 more months, and everything would have been fine. So that's, I think, what was happening with the whole renaming strategy.
Yeah, I like that theory. Yeah, now he can just focus on surfing and MMA and do what he does. I want to make sure we get to predictions because there's some interesting stuff there, but also there's been a lot of stuff in late stage valuations because a lot of people that like listen to this or work at startups, like your payday is in your options as far as it going public, right? And so it's interesting how things all of a sudden have been kind of heating up, even though it's like headwinds of what's going on with the market, a looming recession, interest rates, the consumer reports have come out around housing. But like, well, what are your thoughts there on those valuations?
I think what we're really seeing is that late stage valuations got really completely screwed up in the last 4 or 5 years, right? Especially if you look at all the good companies, right, that came out of in last 4 or 5 years, like Notion, Canva, Airtable, and even the companies that are going public, like Instacart. The stat is all the early stage investors, like pre-series A and Series A and pre-series A, they all made good multiples on Instacart IPO, right? At the end of the day, they've invested probably like less than 100 million valuation and exited at 8 billion. So, however, like that's a classic early stage investment exit that you would expect from early stage investing. So for them, it was a good exit. But the late stage investors, whoever invested after Series B or C, are all underwater. And the same is the case with Notion, Canva, Airtable, and take any other products that are actually good, right? That have a legit market. Airtable is making 150 million ARR last time I checked, right? Something along that line. So it's a good product, and I personally like using Airtable. I think there is something there. I like Canva, but Canva's last round was at $40 billion.
Jeez.
So what we've really done with these late stage valuations is we really screwed up late stage valuations. And I always wondered why this. I mean, people give different reasons for why this is happening, but it it's a question that I still don't get it, because in late stage markets there are only 4 or 5 really big players who can invest at that level and that amounts of money, or maybe 10, like, and they still didn't have any negotiating power, which is really interesting to me, right? And we often see like VC firms negotiating founders at all stages. So I was really still, I don't have the answer to this question, like why is no one negotiating these companies down and making a case that, hey, can you grow into this, like can we get an exit? Because I feel like venture sort of got confused itself with late stage investing. And even now, like there are some firms raising funds to invest in the secondaries for some of the startups. I feel like if I was an LP, I wouldn't do that and invest in those funds, because the same company which is doing pre-seed or seed, they're claiming that they understand, late stage valuations, but I wouldn't invest in a firm that is doing both seed and late stage, because I think as an industry, we're getting that wrong. I don't think we are negotiating the price in the sense that it makes sense for us to get a return, right? So at least that's what I think. And even with the good companies, you make, because at some point the valuation starts to not make sense, right? Even for good companies, like I think we are hearing, and yesterday I was hearing $90 billion for OpenAI in the secondary market, right? With SpaceX, I think we've seen 120 billion. And even look at Stripe. Stripe was something like 120 billion last year in secondary markets. I've heard that price pitched to me. And now it's sort of in comparison with Adyen. Adyen is looking like a better company than Stripe. And I don't know these numbers. These are just public narratives, and it could be completely false. And Stripe might be a better company than Adyen. I don't know which one is. But one thing is sure, that in the payments industry itself, the margins are sort of being squeezed, and Visa and MasterCard continue to be the players, ending up with most of the revenues in the space, right? So even Stripe investors, late stage investors, I mean, you could easily predict that they might be underwater when Stripe goes public, right? Unless they drastically grow into their valuation, which is hard, right? Because it's payments market. It's not like it's a completely brand new market. I mean, Stripe is a great company. It's like the iconic company in the last 10 years, right? It will still be. It's not saying that Stripe is a bad company, but any good company at certain valuation will not make sense. And I think we really screwed the pooch with late stage valuation with all these companies that I've mentioned.
Yeah, all the stuff that was happening between like 2020 to 2022, it's we're definitely paying the price now. There's some fun stuff in here around predictions, and I'd love to kind of get into those. You even have like $1 trillion opportunities, but even Rivian you have in here is like the second EV player after Tesla, and I totally agree with that, just because I think of Tesla had this cult following, and I'm seeing it with Rivian, but in a different degree, where there's like this different like true affinity and love for the brand and the traction, where you have these like early adopters and evangelists, and then the product's pretty impressive. But yeah, interested to see the predictions you have laid out that you're thinking through as you look ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first one is not technically a prediction because I don't know if it will happen or not, but it's my take on it's US food. The next $1 trillion opportunity. Everyone talks about healthcare because it's 17% of US GDP, and but the problem with healthcare is all about treating you. It's not about preventing you, right? In the US especially, or maybe you can argue even in the world, right? Every doctor is treating you, right? You only go to the doctor when something happens, but you don't go to the doctor, even though you do the yearly physical, you don't really go to the doctor to prevent, something. So if you look at then prevention, how do you prevent and make your population healthy? That comes from food, essentially, right? And I think the food ecosystem in the US is so broken that, I mean, that's the most important big concern for me in the US right now is the food that we are eating is, it's not the food we should be eating being in a developed society, right? Or what we call as a developed nation, right? If you eat chicken wings outside, it's guaranteed that that has been butchered like maybe 5 months before and frozen for like 4 months and just reheat in the micro oven, before you're eating, and mixed with some sauce that has been made, I don't know, a year back, with 40 ingredients. Half of them are unhealthy to you and carcinogenic and might cause you cancer, right? So, and the worst of all is it doesn't taste good, right? This is an average restaurant experience in the US, right? That's why the only worthy restaurants in the US are going to are really high end, otherwise just cook at home or go to Chipotle, right? Everything else is basically, at this point, like, is uneatable. And grocery sections, right? If you try to avoid 2 or 3 ingredients, the entire grocery section is unshoppable. If you go to any big retail store, it's unshoppable essentially. Like go to Walmart and let's say you're not eating high fructose sugar, you're basically eliminating 50% of the store or maybe 60% of the store. So I think that next $1 trillion opportunity is you disrupt how your food is produced. And this is going to be a really hard problem. I thought Whole Foods will be a solution, but Whole Foods also really screwed the pooch here because they have so many green labels. I don't understand which is the actual green label that I need to buy. And I think the regulatory bodies are at fault here. And that's why you see like obesity going up. There's no real control on the ingredients that cause cancer that are being used in the healthcare system. Like that's also been a regulatory failure. But I think Amazon should get into this opportunity. Like they are the company that are positioned rightly and have sort of like the risk appetite than any other company to go into this. I don't expect Walmart to go into this because they're always been the discount players and sort of the cheapest product available. So you have to sort of, Whole Foods is sort of like aligns with this as the brand, but they need to start to target a significant, let's say they start with chicken and go from there, right? They have to start with some products that, that are produced in a sustainable way, bring back nutrition, make chicken tasty for once in the US, because chicken is not tasted in the US. If you talk to you talk to anyone coming from outside US, and if they've recently visited other countries and let them taste your chicken, US chicken is actually getting blander and blander every year because US chicken is optimized for the fastest growth and a large breast size. These two are the factors that are being optimized in the US chicken. And that means 60% of the antibiotics that are imported in the US are fed to the chicken or meat industry, not to the human beings. So it's actually, we are growing meat using antibiotics. So I think US has to at some point, face this problem and tackle this. We cannot, the capitalism part of this has overdone. Like at some point we've sort of over-engineered everything. We have more protein being produced per human being than ever, but at what cost? It's absolute bullshit that we are eating at this point, and we are not really, eating the right food, essentially, right? That's my big $1 trillion opportunity prediction.
And just to jump in on that, it's funny because like I grew up on the back of fast food, which, as we know now, that's horrible, right? And we probably even knew at the time, but it's fast, it's cost effective, and for the busy life, it's set up for you. But it's like, I mean, if you could just like figure out like, is there an easy, cost effective way to give people healthy food? The second and third order effect of like what that does is amazing. But I think you're right on Amazon because they have the storefront, they have the distribution with Whole Foods. It's like if anyone could land the plane on it, it's these guys, right? So that's super interesting. But no, very cool, man.
Yeah, the second prediction I have is Rivian being the second biggest EV player. I think for a couple of things. I think their product looks better than Tesla, I think. And in the US, the most profitable cars are SUVs and trucks, right? They are the most selling and most popular and most profitable cars. I think the trucks are actually, Ford trucks are actually the most profitable cars. I mean, if you ignore Tesla, I think, or it used to be at least for a couple of years. And people are loving the brand, as you said. And Elon is sort of becoming a polarizing figure in terms of his political takes. I mean, he's obviously super intelligent, but also is super weird. So a lot of people are starting to sort of not like Elon, which is affecting the brand Tesla, right? When we have such a polarizing figure, you'll have a certain percentage of people not buying the car. And I think we're starting to see that. And I think Rivian still has sort of a pivotal moment to reach. It has not reached a pivotal moment. I would argue it is like Tesla in 2017, where they were facing a huge crash crunch. We wouldn't know the company would survive. For now, Rivian has, I think, enough cash in the bank to survive the next 3 years. So the next 3 years are going to be pivotal, whether or not it will become. But my prediction is that it will become. I don't see any other car company that will be mass adopted. Maybe some of these Chinese companies that are coming into the US, they might have a chance. But if you're talking about the US companies, I think after Tesla, Rivian is going to be one of those.
No, I totally see it. Just I look at what people are driving and what's in like on the street. It's like, oh wow, it's coming. Just how like all of a sudden everyone freaking had a Tesla. Nice, man. And I actually, and crap, I actually have to go. For people, Nataraj, that want to like hear more from you, follow you, where can they go? Can you point them in the direction of your podcast or where else you're making content?
Yeah, sure. So I produce my podcast sort of bi-weekly or bi-monthly. You can check out it on YouTube, Spotify. It's called Startup Project. The best way to find all my content is on my website, thestartupproject.io. And I have my newsletter there, my YouTube channel, and all the content and articles and everything I've written until now. I also write a newsletter, which is weekly. You'll receive it sometime Sunday or Monday. It's called Above Average. I try to give above average smart opinions about big tech, startups, venture capital, angel investing, basically the things that I'm continuously interested and maybe an opinion that is not out there. So that's what I try to optimize my newsletter for. That's it.
Yeah, if you want to kind of have your finger on the pulse and see what's going on, it's a nice, refreshing take as opposed to some of the copycat stuff that's out there. But Nataraj, I'm glad we got to finally do this, man. Thanks for the time, and hopefully look forward to bumping into you more down at Startup Hall.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, and this was fun for me, and let's do more whenever we have time.
Cool, man. I'm down. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.